On this edition, I'm going to break down and predict the upcoming fight between Frank Mir and Daniel Cormier. Now, this is actually recent news. It actually came out yesterday saying that Frank Mir was going to be crossing over into Strikeforce to take on Daniel Cormier. And I know recently, actually in the beginning of the week, that there was a rumor that Daniel Cormier would be taking on Tim Sylvia. And Dana White obviously squashed this rumor, saying that Tim Sylvia is not contracted under Zuffa and this fight would not be happening. No disrespect to you Tim Sylvia fans, but thank goodness that fight isn't happening and that Frank Mir is going over to Strikeforce, because that fight makes a lot more sense. Daniel Cormier is coming off the biggest win of his career. He's winning. He just won the Strikeforce Grand Prix. Frank Mir is coming off of a loss in the title fight for the UFC Heavyweight Championship. That fight makes a lot more sense. I consider Daniel Cormier a top 5 heavyweight. In my opinion, I think Daniel Cormier has potential, and the guy's for real. And it makes a lot more sense that Mir's coming off a championship loss. Cormier's coming off of a win in the Grand Prix. This fight makes a lot more sense than Tim Sylvia coming into Strikeforce, being contracted on the Zuffa, and fighting Daniel Cormier. So thank goodness that fight's not happening, and this fight is happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down both fighters. I'm going to do my predictions. So I'll start with Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier continues to get better every single time he enters the cage, and he has not tapped into his full potential. He continues to get better, but he's not tapped into his full potential. He has an incredibly high ceiling, too. So, like I continue to say, he's training at AK, and there are wrestlers that grasp the concept of striking, and there are wrestlers that don't grasp the concept of striking. Daniel Cormier is most definitely one of those guys that grasps the concept of striking. In regards to stand-up game, it has a lot to do with his physical attributes. He is incredibly athletic. He is deceiving knockout power, incredible hand speed, good footwork and head movement. In the stand-up department, he can put together combinations. He works his jab well. He likes to finish his combinations with kicks. He works a good 1-2. He has good hooks. And the thing about Daniel Cormier is that, like I say, he has good deceiving knockout power. The guy can finish you in the blink of an eye, and he can really pick you apart, too. He's not an easy guy to hit. He has good stand-up defense. And the thing is that Cormier has a 71-inch reach. He's fought with a reach disadvantage in practically every single fight in the heavyweight division. And in this fight, he'll be fighting Frank Mir, who has a 79-inch reach. He has a huge reach disadvantage in this fight, but the thing that he does well is he's very good at getting inside a fighter's reach, getting inside the strikes. He has good pop in his step, good head movement. He's not an easy guy to hit. He's very good at getting inside. That's one of the best attributes in the stand-up department. Very good at getting inside and fighting his reach effectively, especially with such a disadvantage. So, continues to get better. I can't wait to see how it looks against Frank Mir. In regards to grappling, Daniel Cormier fights well in the clinch, can strike in the clinch, he can sweep your leg, he has a good single leg takedown, he has a good double leg takedown. I mean, we're talking about a guy who slammed Josh Barnett over his head. A lot of people who thought that Josh Barnett was going to go into that fight and dominate Daniel Cormier in the grappling department. He proved a lot of people wrong in that fight, and he proved that he is one of the best wrestlers in the heavyweight division. There's no doubt about that. He's an Olympic level wrestler. He wrestled in the Olympics, and if he gets you down to the ground, which he can most definitely do, he's very explosive. He's relentless and tenacious with his takedown attempts, and if he gets on top of you, he can work in ground and pound. He can submit fighters. He will not submit Frank Mir in this fight. That's the one thing I can guarantee. Daniel Cormier also he's never been finished before. The guy has most definitely a battle-tested chin. I know he's not been as many fights as Frank Mir, and a lot of guys maybe not late in the strikes to Daniel Cormier, but for a guy who could stand 5 rounds with Josh Barnett, I'm not saying Josh Barnett's an elite-level striker, but Daniel Cormier did get struck in that fight. He did take a couple strikes to the head. I mean, I'm not going to say his chin's 100% battle-tested, but he's not an easy guy to put away. And he has good submission defense. But how will it hold up against a fighter like Frank Mir? That's the biggest question. Where I see Daniel Cormier being successful in this fight, I think he could utilize his wrestling, but why play into Frank Mir's strongest part of his game? Why bring it down to the ground and let him use his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Keep the fight standing, use your movement in the outgun, use your superior speed, and pick apart the guy with your incredible hand speed and work in the deceiving knockout power and try and catch Frank Mir. I mean, if it goes to decision, I could see Daniel Cormier winning this fight, but I quite frankly, I could see Daniel Cormier being successful by finishing Frank Mir in the stand-up department via TKO or knockout. So that's where I see Daniel Cormier being successful. So Frank Mir. Frank Mir is obviously the much more experienced fighter. He's coming off of a loss to Junior Dos Santos in a lackluster fight, not his best fight. But he's a balanced mixed martial arts. Frank Mir is a black belt in Kempo Karate, trains in Muay Thai, boxing. Did do wrestling in high school, and he's also an outstanding Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. So in regards to stand-up department, Frank Mir lacks ideal speed and hand speed, good footwork and all that other stuff, but he's a smart stand-up fighter. He does have a very good jab. He can throw a 1-2. He has devastating leg kicks. He's got good power in his hands. I mean, like any heavyweight, he has good power in his hands. If Frank Mir is to catch you with his hands, you're most definitely going to be going to sleep. The question is if he can land it or not. He does pick his spots well, but once again, not the faster fighter in this fight, but he does have a 79 39-inch reach. If he can use his reach effectively in this fight and keep Daniel Cormier outside of his reach right at the end of his punches, he could be successful in this fight. Could he finish Daniel Cormier in the stand department? I think it's a reach, but it is possible. In regards to the one thing about Frank Mir is that he doesn't have the most exceptional takedown ability. He's not really explosive. He can utilize the cage. He can set up his takedowns. But in regards to this fight, I mean, it's a big reach getting a guy down like Daniel Cormier with his wrestling ability. I mean, we're talking about Frank Mir struggled to get Junior Dos Santos down on the ground. The guy doesn't have a wrestling background, outstanding takedown defense, but he did struggle to do that. How do you expect to do it against a fighter like Daniel Cormier? But still, Frank Mir can get fights down the ground, whether he's to catch a leg kick or he's to sweep your leg, take you down to the ground. This is where Frank Mir shines. His Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is just on a whole other level, and he really solidified that by submitting Minotauro Nogueira in absolutely devastating fashion. I mean, the only guy to ever submit Minotauro Nogueira, one of the most renowned Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners and coaches. So I think that really solidified that. Frank Mir's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is on a whole other level in the heavyweight division. And I said Frank Mir doesn't have explosiveness or speed. The one thing he does do in the blink of an eye is lock-in submissions. He can do it both in his guard or in the dominant position, whether it's getting your neck, an arm, getting your leg. He can do it in any way imaginable, and he can do it just like that in the blink of an eye. His submission ability is outstanding. In regards to Frank Mir, though, his chin is most definitely questionable. He has been finished. He's been wobbled before. We've seen Junior Dos Santos do it. We've seen Nogueira do it. We've seen plenty of fighters do it. Frank Mir can take the strikes, but he tends to get wobbled sometimes. So can his chin hold up against a fighter like Daniel Cormier? That's the biggest question. So where I see Frank Mir being successful in this fight, I think Frank Mir can most definitely be successful standing. I think he's not the faster fighter in this fight. He could land a strike in Daniel Cormier, but I think it's a reach. I think the most important thing in this fight is that he's got to get the fight down to the ground, where the best part of his game is, and that's with his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and his grappling. Can he get Daniel Cormier down to the ground is the biggest question, but get down to the ground, and he's got to submit or knock out Daniel Cormier. If this fight goes to decision, I do not see Frank Mir winning this fight, so he has to finish this fight. I think most definitely submission's the way to do it, but he could also KO Daniel Cormier. It's possible. I think it's a reach. So where my prediction lies in this fight, I have nothing but the utmost respect for Frank Mir, but this is a bad matchup for him. Okay, he struggled to take down Junior Dos Santos. Doesn't have the most exceptional takedown ability, and you're going to do it against an Olympic-level wrestler. He could very well keep this one standing. I see him landing his strikes against Daniel Cormier, but I see Daniel Cormier he's going to fend off the takedown attempts from Frank Mir. I think he's going to be too fast for Frank Mir. I see Daniel Cormier using his movement in the cage very effectively. He's going to pick his spots. He's going to end up wobbling Frank Mir, and he's going to go in for the kill, and he's either going to finish Frank Mir via TKO or knockout. And he's going to inch one step closer to potentially fighting for the UFC heavyweight title and hopefully crossing over to the UFC. So I'll take Daniel Cormier defeating Frank Mir via TKO or knockout. And that's what I have for this edition.